I'm great. I'm Alan Leonard. I'm the president of Civic.
Hi.
Hi. The guys.
I didn't know you guys.
Hey, thank you. So, Congressman Taylor was born and raised on the Delaware Peninsula. Let's see, I'm going to have to use some of my notes. He's an ex-Navy SEAL from SEAL Team 4. He was wounded in a raft. All right, injured. All right, he was elected to the House of Delegates, the 5th District in 2013. 2016, he was elected as our rep to Congressman, where he's a member of the House Appropriations Committee. And that's about as good as I can do. Now, I see a lot of people taking pictures. You're taking pictures of the wrong guy. Okay.
No, that's my tracker.
You're welcome. You're welcome here. We have cookies and all that. But without any more ado, I'd like to introduce Congressman Taylor and give him the floor.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you. That's my opponent's tracker. He's a nice guy, though, so don't give him crap. He actually is very nice. So thank you for having me. I appreciate you guys coming out, especially considering what's going on with the weather. I just came from Norfolk. We were in the suburban acres. Thank you. I guess you gave your report. Everything good, Brian?
No, I haven't. This is my first time coming to this one.
Oh, really?
I work back here every day, so I just come by.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate what you do, of course, and you're going to be busy the next few days, it looks like. Let me start with that, quite frankly. We've spoken with the governor's office and a conference call with him, as well as with FEMA and the Coast Guard and everything like that. Please listen to some of these warnings, because this thing has the potential to be very bad. Harvey type stuff in Houston, where a state over Houston just dumped, didn't move, and stalled. That's the biggest problem that we face, is if it stalls here. And Virginia's going to be in sort of the center of the impact of this. So from the coast to western part of the state. And the issue is, of course, our surrounding states, where we normally get some resources from to help us out. They're in the same boat. So it's really going to be first responders and the emergency coordinators who are going to be doing a lot of work. And they're going to be slammed. So it's important for us as a community to come together and make sure we're prepared, so we're not contributing to that. That they're going to be overworked. There's no question about it. So enough of that. As he said, I was raised on the Eastern Shore. I started working on a farm at age 11, paying taxes, raised by a single mother. I was not in the best of behavior in the beginning, so she signed me up for Big Brothers, Big Sisters. You guys familiar with Big Brothers, Big Sisters? So mentorship program. If it wasn't for my mentor, he wouldn't be speaking to me right now. He changed the trajectory of my life, really taught me everything from having a napkin on my lap at the dinner table to stock options and much more. Really instilled certain self-confidence and self-worth in me, which enabled me, quite frankly, to leave that little small town and with the goal of becoming a Navy SEAL. And that's what I did when I left that small town right after high school. Spent just over 8 years in the military in South Central America, Iraq, and then when I got out, I got into real estate and then security consulting. I spent roughly 4 years going back and forth to Yemen. Don't go to Yemen. Don't go to Yemen. Negotiating with armed tribesmen and stuff like that, which is why it's easy to negotiate in Congress. It's in Arabic everywhere. But in between, I used my GI Bill to get an undergrad in international relations from Harvard University via their extension school. Finished all my master's coursework, but now I just have to find time to do a thesis. We'll see if that happens. And I spent 2 terms in the House of Delegates. And then, before Scott Bridgel decided to retire and then ascended to U.S. Congress. So when I first sat down with the Speaker of the House, he asked, what committees would you like to be on? He said, I imagine you want to be on House Armed Services because of your background and your district. And I said, no, sir, I would like to be on Appropriations. And he looked at me and he said, no, it's not going to happen. Freshmen, they're not on Appropriations. But I'm stubborn, so we spent about 4 months or so going through and meeting with everybody on the steering committee who decides what committee you're on. And we got on Appropriations. So why is that important? It's important for this area, of course, because we have about 43-ish % of our economy is direct federal spending and everything around it. So Virginia did not have an appropriator at the time. I'm the first appropriator ever in Virginia's history as a freshman to get it right out the gate. Why is that important? You have these committees, of course, that authorize. So they might authorize the building of 3 submarines or something, but then you got to go to Appropriations to get the money. Right? So I knew that I could be impactful and effective on the authorization side by being on Appropriations, because they just make relationships, of course, and then they get money. How else does that help? I sit on the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Subcommittee, as well as Homeland Security, which is Customs and Border Patrol, DHS, TSA, Coast Guard, ICE, and then also legislators. So, for example, in 2018, hundreds of millions of dollars is coming to this area, still coming, for military construction projects. Not frivolous spending, needed backlog and maintenance. We have 8 major military installations. We got a project for just about every single base. That is not a coincidence that you have an appropriator subcommittee who is fighting for those things for this area. And when we got millions of dollars also in fiscal year 19 that we're working on for this area. I ran on 3 main things, although I work on a bunch of different stuff that we'll talk about tonight, and I'll answer any questions you guys have. But mainly, it's obviously a strong military. What's going on here? A strong military, as well as Veterans Affairs and economy. So on that military side, most of us are familiar with that term sequestration, those mandatory cuts that really harmed our military. And what you had was you had, by law, the military had to cut, right? So they'd come to Congress and they'd say, all right, I'm the Army, and I spend $500 million a year in empty infrastructure, in empty buildings. And then the Congress would say, no, you can't cut that. That's in my district, you can't cut that. And then the Air Force might come and say, all right, well, here's a program, it's $1 billion program, and it doesn't fight today's wars, or excuse me, it fights yesterday's wars, not today's or tomorrow's. But the congressmen and women would say, no, you can't cut that because that's supply chains in my district. So then the military had to cut anyway, because it's by law, and where can they cut? Maintenance, readiness, training, of course. And as many of you know, if you defer maintenance on a ship, then you have a cascading negative effect, because it's going to be more expensive in the long run. You're going to hurt deployment schedules, which is mess up the schedules, which does what? It hurts our families, our military families, and it's just the wrong way to do business. So we've got a reprieve for 2 years on sequestration. I'm proud of that. We've spent a lot of money up front to help rebuild the military. Short term, that's important. However, long term, we got to make some tough decisions. In Congress, we have to have leaders who are willing to say, okay, let's get rid of some empty buildings, even though they might be in our district. On the veteran side, we have the fastest growing veteran population in the nation. Women veterans, Iraq veterans, Afghanistan veterans. The VA says we have about 40% more veterans falling into the system in the next decade, and about 60% more demanding care. On the 63% of the veterans who use the Hampton facility are from the South Side. We're already over capacity. Some of you in here probably use it. I do. You have the CBOC and a small outpatient center in Virginia Beach and one in Chesapeake. Congress authorized the closing of them and a bigger one to be built. But as you can imagine, sorry, I got my butt. But the Congress, they've authorized it, but with a lot of things, if someone's not championing it, it doesn't necessarily get done, or it's way, no, it's not a priority for people, right? So one of our first meetings in Hampton told us that no one was really pushing this. So we've had the decision maker in my office like 7 times over the past year to be able to push to get this outpatient center built. And you will see in a few months, GSA will announce the bid for that. It's going to get built. It's going to get built most likely in Virginia Beach, possibly Chesapeake. They're going to bid on it. Obviously, I'd like to have Virginia Beach have it, but their goal is to get the thing done first and foremost. Also, on the veterans issue, less than 2% of bills that are introduced. And by the way, I've introduced about 17 bills, and every single one of them has a Democrat co-sponsor. I don't have a bill. I don't introduce a bill that doesn't have a Democrat co-sponsor. Some of them are tougher than others, but every one that I have has a Democrat co-sponsor. We try to be as bipartisan as possible. Less than 2% of bills introduced go into law. Legislation's tough. It's tough because you got to get it through a lot of, you got to get it heard in the subcommittee, through full committee, through the House floor, and then of course, same thing on the Senate side to the President's desk. I'm proud to tell you that I have a bill that's been signed into law by the President already. It's a Veterans Affairs bill. It deals with accountability at the senior levels of the VA, and just to give you a quick background, Hampton, one of the first meetings we were with, they were performing at a 1-star out of a 5-star level. They took the director and they just swapped them out somewhere else with no accountability. So essentially, we gave our problems to other veterans somewhere else. And as you can imagine, if you extrapolate that across the VA system, you got a lot of underperformers, a lot of wasted taxpayer dollars, quite frankly, because you got to pay for those moves and all that stuff like that. So our VA accountability bill, the VA secretary, he or she shall sign off on those moves and report to Congress. So I'm proud to say, we beat someone who had passed one law in 16 years to rename a post office, and we already have a bill passed, one that's important to our district. On appropriations, as opposed to legislation, those bills go through. 12 bills fund the government, they go through. So we're able to put language within appropriations that would be very difficult or take a long time legislatively, and we're able to push that through on appropriations. And we've been able to do that, and we'll get into that in a second. Actually, we'll just go ahead and start one. So we got flooding going on, right? We got sea level rise, we got recurrent flooding, we got Norfolk has subsidence, it's sinking a little bit, so we have some issues here. We have to work on resilience. You will hear politicians tell you all the time that yeah, you know, we support those things, but ask them what they've done. What have you done about it? So let me tell you what we've done about it. And it's tough. It's tough to do anything, quite frankly, right now. Number one, we're protecting our bases. 8 major military installations in this district, huge for the economy, obviously. If there is a BRAC, they're going to look at access, base access. The base right now, internally, can deal with resilience. They can spend money on their piers and their seawall and stuff like that, but they couldn't do it on the access roads, moving in and out. So we actually put language in appropriations bills that would prioritize and allow for DoD to work with localities to have resilience to get soldiers and sailors on and off the base, therefore protecting our military assets. What else are we doing about it? We put a bill for it now that should be marked up in the next month or so, and that is to recognize centers of excellency in flooding and sea level rise. We are the second most vulnerable area in the country after Louisiana. So what does that do? ODU, William and Mary, they're leaning forward on these issues. They helped us write the bill, actually. If we get that, they're going to go for that designation, which then might translate into research and development dollars, as well as economic clusters, small businesses that actually deal with resilience so that we can help ourselves here. We can export those services around the coast in the country and possibly around the world. So what I do want to tell you is, you know, I understand that on one hand, I'm a congressman. I can make a phone call, people are going to answer. I can shine light on things. I can apply pressure. I can do all that. On the other hand, I'm one of 435 people, right? So you can't do anything in some respects. So understanding what the limits of your power and how you can be impactful with your office on each problem set is always a challenge. But it's something that I like to do. I like to solve problems. And that's what we do. My goal is to be impactful for you. It's to do things. It's not to talk. It's not to say, I support this, I support that, whatever. I want to actually do stuff. And I would put our record against any freshman congressman around the country, quite frankly. And we're actually going to put forth some little note that shows like all your congressmen in Virginia and your senators. That will show what we've done the last 2 years. What have you accomplished legislatively, language-wise? What have you actually done? I do want to say there is how many of you guys are familiar with the Shanti Billy case? You remember that, the Shanti Billy case? The young girl was abducted on Little Creek Naval Base. Oh, yeah. And then they found her body, unfortunately, in North Carolina. So I'm proud to say this is one of the best things I think that we're gonna do. When that happened, and during when she was still missing, I got a couple of text messages from people in between. And then you guys have a great Civic League. You got a lot of people. It's great. How you doing? The other one I was at, they had a decent amount, but they had like a lot of food and stuff. Like, I see what you're doing to bring people in, right? So during this, when she was still abducted and when they hadn't found her yet, I get these text messages, and I was on my way to DC, and they said, "Would you meet with his family?" And I said, "Sure. Can I meet with him a little early because I gotta fly out?" And we met, and I knew almost immediately that this family can't get some bad news, just by how things were shaping up. And so I canceled my flight, and VB Police was heading, I think, we talked to the chief of police, and then Norfolk, and then the base police, and then the FBI. And so we called all of them. We basically pushed the FBI to take over the case, and it was necessary because she, actually eventually got found in North Carolina, so we had to get these resources available. So when the unfortunate thing happened, we were trying to figure out how can we help with this issue when you have adults that might be abducted or something like that. And we looked at the Amber Alert. There's an Amber Alert, there's a Silver Alert, right? So 18 and younger, you have the Amber Alert. 65 and older, you have the Silver Alert, right? And what does that do? So, let's start with the Amber Alert. In 2000, I think it's 16 or 15, I might get my date wrong, there were 179 Amber Alerts that were initiated. 155 of them were recovered. 43 of them were directly attributable to the Amber Alert itself. Saved their lives, right? So we looked at this. Why don't we? The Civil Alert's similar. What that does is put forth resources, broadcast, telecommunications, social media. Of course, we've all probably shared Amber Alerts and stuff like that. But there's nothing for adults. Now, some of you don't want to be found. Nothing for adults. And actually, Virginia Beach Police this morning tweeted out, and there was a lady in her 50s, and she was missing, and they were asking for the public help. And they said, we need some help here because we're worried about her safety, and she was missing. So we crafted what's called an Ashanti alert to honor her legacy and also save lives. So I've been working pretty much overtime on that because, again, legislation's tough. You got to get it through, and it took a while to get through Judiciary Committee and find offsets to pay for it and all that stuff, and then work through leadership. So what I'm telling you is, unless something happens, we're going to be voting on that bill in the House on September 25th, which is the year anniversary that family came to my office. And they're going to be there. They're going to be there too. So I'm very proud of that. And we're working on a Senate person as well because, again, you got to go to the Senate, you got to find a champion there, not someone who just talks about it, but someone that actually does stuff. And I think that we will. We want to get to the president's desk, hopefully, within a month. That's the goal, to get that done. Virginia passed one similar. They've already used it 5 times. So I'm very proud of that. All right, I'm talking at you a lot, so why don't I just answer questions? Yes, sir.
The bill that you got passed, how proud are you of that bill after it gets through the other packages?
Legislating is tough. At the Virginia level, I think if my numbers might be wrong or something, so for my trackers, make sure I'm right. I think we passed like 10 laws in Virginia. Virginia's a little bit, it's just easier, right? It's faster paced stuff and everything. It's a lot smaller. It's tough to legislate at the U.S. level for sure. And we spent a lot of time sort of shepherding that process. I mean, really trying to push it having meetings with the folks who are on the subcommittee. And I have great relationships up in Congress. We're not part of any caucus. I'm part of caucuses, but not a caucus that's like the Freedom Caucus or the Tuesday Group or anything ideologically that would not allow me to be flexible and work with everybody. So I'm very proud of it because we shepherded that process through there. We found a champion in the Senate. We worked with staff in the Senate. I personally was calling them and everything like that too to actually get it done. And it takes that to actually move it soon. So I'm very proud of it, absolutely. And it's something that is impactful for this area, right, for veterans. So very proud of it. Yes, ma'am. Good to see
Do you
you.
have an update on your office's efforts for the federal employees to
Sure.
pay raise?
Great question. So we have about 40,000-ish federal employees that are out there. And obviously there's been some hold-ons and pay raises from them for a while. Our office had already sort of tried to lead the effort and spoke to OPM about the locality pay, right? So the cost of living allowance here in the area was already lower than other areas, as other areas around the country based upon the cost of living here. So we were already sort of working on that, and the president, he announced that he was going to cancel the pay raise. Well, I don't agree with that. I think that, especially in this area, people that work here are just as essential for our national security apparatus as other folks as well, right? And they do a good job. So we actually led a bipartisan letter that we sent to the president. And I heard the president talk. He backtracked a little bit. I think he talked about that he was going to look at it. The Senate has that pay raise in their appropriations bill. So our first step for that is to get the president. That's the easiest step. Change his mind. I have a gut feeling that he might. If he doesn't, then I think that we'll be advocating, and certainly those folks who signed the letter, the Democrats and Republicans, will be advocating to put it in the House appropriations to match up with the Senate, and then the programs will go to the president's desk. I have a gut feeling he's going to reverse course. Yes, sir.
I've been a Republican for 40 years, and I like you. I think you're a good.
I like you too.
I respect you, but what I'm really wondering, I'm about to leave the Republican Party, and I'm just wondering if you feel like maybe our Republicans in Congress are going to find a voice anytime soon about the level, frankly, of unprecedented incompetence and corruption in this administration. And that's bad enough, but the silence is deafening, and it comes with great cost. Great question.
I think you have a great question, and I really do. And my promise to you is, when I agree with the president, I say it. When I don't agree with him, like for example, Charlottesville pay raises, I'm more than willing to stand up and say it. But I don't do it like I go, when I'm on the news channels, whether it's Fox or CNN or MSNBC, I know the difference in how they frame the interview. I understand how they ask the question, and I understand what they want me to sort of, what line they want me to go. I'm going to say what I feel and try to best represent you guys. I do think that there are some bad things that have happened in the administration. I do think that there are some folks that needed to go in the administration, but I also think there are a lot of competent people, and I work with them a lot. And I'm saddened, quite frankly, by the discourse in our country today.
Being led by the top.
I get it, and look, you could research tons of interviews. I'm sure that you guys already have on CNN and stuff when I've spoken to or spoken against some of the tweets and some of the unnecessary rhetoric and stuff like that. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Like I told you, every one of my bills are bipartisan. I try to work together with people. I think that's the best thing to do for this nation.
The silence remains that.
I understand. I understand, but at the same time, when I go on, if I'm speaking or I'm answering your questions, stuff like that, there are people who want me to absolutely denounce him every single day, with every single thing. Then there are other people who are like, I get it from both sides, right? I upset the far right, I upset the far left, right? That means I must be doing something right. But seriously, there are people who want me to condemn him every single day, and there are people who want me to never speak against him. What I will say to you is, if I agree with him, I'll say it, and if I don't, I'll say it, and I have no problem doing that. And I think you have to be diplomatic in some ways, because you don't. I don't want to unnecessarily say it every single day, and that hurts you. It hurts my ability to get things done for you, right? But if there's something that needs to be said, like Charlottesville, failure leadership, 100% failure leadership, in my opinion, and I said it on national television. I can't speak for anybody else except for me.
That might be the crux of the question, is how do you and other congressmen who may have the same opinion move the leadership of the party into that same sort of a role, rather than either being silent or excusing things that they don't agree with?
I've seen Paul Ryan come out against. I have. But I've also seen him. This is what I'll say to you. I've seen him come out, but I've also seen him be a little too conflict averse in some respects. But party leadership for us is changing, right? No matter what happens in November, there's going to be a new speaker. There's going to be new leadership that's coming. And I think that there are several issues that I would tell you that internally, with our party, people are going to be not voting for a speaker unless they go in a certain direction. So I think that's coming, but that's my answer. Yes, sir.
So, of the 8 installations, which one is the oldest?
Oh, really? You put me on a spot like that? The oldest installation, well, most of them were like World War I,
Okay.
100-year anniversaries in 2017, which was the 100-year anniversary of World War I.
Portsmouth Shipyard. Portsmouth Shipyard.
Yeah, that
far.
Okay, there's so you got a lifeline.
Yeah, exactly.
You
Across
got a
the
lifeline.
audience.
So that's awesome. No, sir. So first of all, thanks for your service in Congress, and that's a huge step. Thank you for your service in the military, and that's awesome as well. And the only reason I asked the age of the facilities, we are in decrepit conditions in supporting our nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, and our Trident missiles, and our ballistic submarines. We are in severe degraded conditions that require congressional, attention is there.
That's
It's
what
money.
That's what it requires, mostly. Right.
But it also requires a little bit of hands-on. Instead of talking about it, instead of saying it's the oldest, and it's supporting the triad and supporting the nation's strategic deterrence, we need to get down there and see it. And I firmly believe that there's a little bit of lack of leadership to engage in that political issue, because across the river, if you will, in Newport News, you've got the beautiful shiny object of making carriers and building submarines and the welfare. That's great. And I'll drive a Porsche or a McLaren but I need to put it into the garage at some point, right? And to put it in
You're
the
not gonna drive it
garage,
every day either.
I'm not
You're
gonna
not
put it in
gonna
a
afford it.
251-year-old facility
Sure.
that has been, and it's decrepit. It is decrepit. Admiral Caldwell, NAFCO 8, who's Department of Energy and Department of Defense Nuclear Power, Bubba, the number 2 ranked senior officer, has determined that that plant, or that yard is decrepit, quote unquote. So, sir, I think with your help, what can you at least say to voting members
Sure.
that
I can say
you can do?
Sure. Well, number one, it's a, you mentioned Newport News Shipbuilding as well. Neither one of them are in my district, by the way. Right?
No, I understand.
They're not in my district. However,
But it's about Virginia
I
and
know
the Commonwealth of
that's
Virginia.
what I'm gonna say to you.
Okay.
However, there are tons of people that work and they live here. They might work there, but they live there, and it's also part of our national security
That's
apparatus, right? Overall. And trust me, we do a lot of work in other people's districts because they ain't making their own slack up, right? And they call us, and appropriations they call us as well. I think that's absolutely necessary. I will tell you, you mentioned Newport News. They actually just reinvested a ton of money because of tax reform into their yard. But you're absolutely right. And what I will tell you that continuing resolutions, I'm an advocate for regular order. That's one thing. On a broader level, I'll bring it in a second, but on a broader level, when you look at the past decade or so, then we've had these continuing resolutions, and the cumulative effect on not just our military apparatus, but also our industrial base has been devastating. And these shutdowns, it's just irresponsible, quite frankly. So I think it needs to be looked at and updating in our whole industrial base. But you also have to look at the workforce there too. That's another piece of it, and how we're building ships. And I'll give you an example. That's an old yard right there. And Newport News is a little bit older too. And I went down to Mississippi and I was at a Huntington Ingalls yard, and then I was at another yard, and the name escapes me. Also. Yeah, but when you look at the difference inside the yard, it's astounding because one of them are like there's room swabbing and stuff, it's slow moving around, and then other one are like it's all digital stuff. I mean they'll tell you that we're not shipbuilders, we're manufacturers. So that's part of it too. That needs to be so you have more efficient and effective yards that are building it with new technology and a skilled workforce. But I agree with you that we need investment there, 100%. And that's something that I'm more than willing to work on. And to start where we are right now with the monies that we have approved, the $700 billion first year, $716 billion, this fiscal year coming up is a start. But that's only a drop. It's a drop in the bucket, quite frankly, in the short term. You're going to need long-term rebuilding because that didn't happen overnight.
No, sir, it didn't.
But if you want to come meet with us, our office, and you have more in-depth insight how we can help, let me know.
But I'd help. I'd love to.
Please, by all means.
Thank you.
I don't pretend to know everything around here. That's for sure.
No.
Yep.
A civics lesson. Thomas Jefferson warned us against the power of political parties. Could you say a few words based on your own experience, how strong the political parties influence what can get done, or how much flexibility an individual freshman congressman has?
I gotta tell you, man, like I said, we have been very effective. We've gotten a lot of stuff done, a lot. And, there's no question that the House is a majoritarian. It's different from the Senate. You'll hear, those guys will be hitting me like, oh, he votes with this party all the time. Well, that's because the party controls the floor. And the bills that come to the floor are gonna be party-based, right? So if I was a Democrat, then I would be voting mostly with the Democrat Party because it's gonna be Democrat bills that come to the floor. That's just the way it is. Right, the House is majoritarian, the Senate is not necessarily, so it's a little bit different. I've been very successful, quite frankly, because I'm very good at relationships. I don't really care about credit necessarily. I'll give that away freely to folks, and that's been I was a guy in the SEAL platoon that we're in the Amazon. I find the guy who finds the guy that gets us water. Right, that's one of my natural strengths. That's why I'm not part of any specific caucus that would hinder my maneuverability and flexibility to be able to bring people together to get things done. So we're right from the get-go, and some of you might not like this because they're establishment, but I'm already on the speakers and the majority leaders. I'm in their kitchen cabinet, if you will, already as a freshman, and I'm the only freshman that's on an A committee, which is on the appropriations committee, the only one, the first one in Virginia ever as a freshman to go to an appropriations. So we're pretty good at being effective. So it hasn't really hindered my ability to get things done for you. Does it for some people? Possibly. Yeah, possibly. Because that's just the way the system works. You do have leadership who controls committees, and they control those things. But it's becoming less and less, though. I would tell you that, like Nancy Pelosi, she's a little stronger. When you look at her, like, she keeps her people in line. That's why, like, if I'm replaced by someone else, I don't have the flexibility. Like the Democrats don't. And I'm not being negative. This is a matter of fact, right? So we have term limits in our subcommittee chairs, 5 years. Goodlatte's about to retire. He's been the Judiciary Chair for 5 years. Someone else will come in. Democrats don't have that. So it's tougher for junior members, if you will, to break out and actually be a lot more effective. Now, because of our society now, and because of media and stuff like that, they can get their individual name better, like on TV and stuff like that. That's true. They can do that and buck the party and be there. But that doesn't mean they're effective. There are a lot of people that I'm not going to name names on both sides that you see on TV all the time, and they don't get anything done. Nothing, except for build their own name, right? So that's not what I'm interested in. We do a lot of TV because it's important that you do it. It's free, but I want to be effective. So in sum, it hasn't really hindered my ability to get things done for you.
Scott, you got time for one more question.
Yes, sir.
This is kind of a joke, but what are some of the things, I mean, obviously to improve the situation on military bases and weaponry and things like that, it's going to take more money. What are some of the programs that's going on in government right now that you think need to be eliminated? And maybe even mention like the building the wall along the border. I mean, is that good use of tax dollars? What is good use of tax dollars? How would you see switching the use of money in a better way, especially since you're on
How much time do I have? You hit 3 points there that I think, let me start with your last one, then I'll go to military, and then I'll go to border, right? So I think number one, it doesn't matter who you are, what party you are, what is the biggest driver of our debt? Does anybody know?
Spending.
Mandatory spending on what? Entitlements. That's what it is.
How about tax decrease?
Well,
No, it's entitled.
it's entitlements by far. We are spending almost more on entitlements than we take in revenue, which means everything else.
Yeah, but I mean, it's
Hold on,
not
let me finish.
revenue side.
So what I'm saying is entitlements. Everyone knows it. They all know it. But as soon as somebody says something, they're like, "Oh, Granny's going off the cliff." If you can bet if I said something like that, you'd see an ad in Virginia Beach in the next couple of weeks right here and say, "Oh, he's going to throw Granny off." That's complete BS. In fact, I actually co-sponsor legislation to have a lockbox on Social Security and Medicare because I don't think any Congress should be able to touch our money. But the reality is we have to look at eligibility, at payments, and start doing something. It's my generation, quite frankly, that's going to have to lead on that issue. It's our generation that's going to have to say, you know what? Social Security, maybe we are living longer. What can we do, eligibility-wise, all those things? It can't affect anybody that's at that age now taking it or they're close to it or anything like that. That's not what I would ever say to do. So if you see it on an ad, it's coming from them. but the reality is that you have to. It's the number one driver of the debt. Everyone knows it. Both sides know it. No one has the guts to actually do something about it. That's what has to happen, number one. Number two, when you talk about military programs, I understand that we have to understand where our threats are and where they're moving forward, right? So this is almost blasphemy in Virginia when you talk about the 355 ships that you'll see. Everybody's like, "Oh, we've got to go to 355 ships." It's not so much the number. It is important to have a number because you have to cover. There's the combatant commanders around the world are requesting more than we have resources-wise to give them. So you do need numbers, but you also need capabilities. You also have to understand what are our threats. Where are we in cyber? What is our cyber policy? Where are we moving for supersonic missiles and stuff like that? And you heard Space Force and stuff, but space is a threat. There is an issue so we have to orient our military and our defense to be able to fight today's wars and tomorrow's wars. And sometimes it's not big, heavy, shiny objects that might need to be built, and they do create jobs. But if you're a ship, for example, and you don't have the ability to deal with a cyber attack, you're dead in the water. You're $1 billion, or if you're a big ship and you have Iran who uses swarming techniques to be able to take down a ship, right? There's a bunch of small boats swarming, and wait till they get drones. When they have swarms of drones, they'll be able to basically stop a $2 billion ship with about $50,000 worth of drones. If you're not dealing with that threat, But it's irresponsible, and so we have to understand where we are, where we need to go. You mentioned border security. Like, I think you do need border security. One of my first trips, because number one, I'm on the appropriations, I'm over Homeland Security. That's one of my things. I knew this was a political issue. One of my first trips was to the border. Every sector of the border. Every one. And not just, the political stuff, but speaking to law enforcement, those folks that are there every single day, who deal with cartels, who control most of that stuff around the border. They need more technology in terms of surveillance and stuff like that. They do need wall in some respects, not everywhere, not a big beautiful wall everywhere, but they do need wall. They need technology and they need people in some places. It's different in different areas. When you look at, for example, the McAllen, Texas sector, when you have flooding and wall actually helps with flooding and the levee and stuff like that, but it's necessary. However, there's like the Rio Grande, that's about 100 miles as the crow flies, but it's 300 miles of snaky river, right? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to do that in some. You got a wall or a mountain in some areas, right? Doesn't make sense. You need more surveillance. I'm interested. You do need more security because there is a huge financial impact to this country when you don't have border security or when you try to put policies in. I was in Homeland Security appropriations thing, and I got to tell you, I'm not trying to be uber partisan and everything like that, but the other side is going a little bit nuts in some respects. I mean, I'm sitting in Homeland Security appropriations thing, and then somebody on the Democrat side puts forth a legislation that says, okay, no pregnant women can be detained. None. By Customs Border Patrol and ICE. No pregnant women. Does any woman in here have that right? You go rob a bank and you're pregnant, you're going to get detained, right? American citizens don't have that right. And furthermore, as soon as you said no pregnant women are going to be detained, who do you think the cartels are going to go to? Pregnant women? And push them there, right? So then somebody puts forth this legislation and says, okay, ICE and Homeland Security, they can't arrest anybody in these sensitive areas. And here's a list of sensitive areas to include like bus stops. How more public can you get? And 1,000 yards from any of those sensitive places. I actually raised my hand and I was like, would the gentleman yield, please? Because I want to ask him, like, is there anywhere in your district, anywhere, that someone could be apprehended if they were illegal or if they had done something illegal? And the answer was no, because he was in New York City. Like, not at all, right? No, you do need proper border security, but yes, you shouldn't just waste money. I'm not for that. When you talk to law enforcement, you talk to Border Patrol, they'll tell you that they're not just, that they're using the monies that we appropriate to them in the way that they need to. Right? And the president he'll say that the wall is being built, in some places it is, in San Diego sector, because you have fencing. But if you go there, you'll see some of them just little sawzall right through it. Like you need some physical barrier there. So I hope that answers your question. I was kind of long-winded, but let me wrap up. Again, I want to repeat what we're talking about with this hurricane. Please be prepared. It can potentially be very bad, but it's an honor to serve you guys. I'm going to continue to keep doing our work and getting things done for you. If our office can do anything for you, we have closed over 1,300 individual cases. Closed them. Social Security, Veterans Affairs, disability stuff. Anything that you need, visas to navigate the federal government, that's what we're here for. Please call on us. But thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. Absolutely. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, I was there. Sorry, I was funny.
Okay, sure. You don't want to stay for a meeting? It's only 36 minutes.